Well, I
board.
see 3 participants, so
Yes, it's
Yeah.
us three. It's the three of us, right?
there's an interesting analogy that I got something out of from Sid was duality, and then there was another instructor of mine. He was heading towards his own profession in architecture and the concept of duality. So it's kind of interesting because like his was like the physical reality of odd numbers, what that does, but what it was looking and seeing something different than what might have been the obvious. So experiences, what are they? They illustrate that concept of duality because sometimes what you see isn't what really is going on, but it is. No, I use that quite frequently in my writing and in my graphics and whatnot because odd numbers, like there's 3 of us. Like when I look at this, the 3 insets at the top, like we naturally, like our mind subliminally comes to rest on the center. So if you have 3, for example, it rests on content as opposed to like a gutter. So I never use 2-column design because your mind would come to rest without you dictating where it lands on a gutter. Well, that's empty space. There's no content. So it's interesting. Our mind is this amazingly potent instrument, whatever word you want to use to describe this incredibly potent means of understanding the universe.
Beyond. Hi, Pallavi. So great to have
Hi.
you with us. We just started and we're
Very
recording.
good.
So um, just to alert everybody, no secret messages while we're recording for the public, right? So we well, let's do a restart here. I mean, we were heading in the direction of non-duality. So, but we don't have to go there. What's the majority of you want? Where do you want to go?
Oh,
I
I'm
guess
interested in going in the direction. I just did a course with Claire Diamond, who talks a lot about, like, she learned from Sid, but also talks about non-duality. And I found it quite remarkable, especially the thing about, like, I read her books and she talked about how the whole idea of self is also just made up in thought. And so I like the issue.
Okay, so we'll keep going in that direction because when Richard was talking about like the metaphor of architecture with non-duality, what came to mind, Richard, I wonder what the 3 of you think. There's a passage, I'm pretty sure it's in Second Chance, where Sid talks about this tree, that there's the outside of the tree and the inside of the tree. And that threw me for a loop. What do you do you all recall that passage where,
Amalila is talking to Richard about the growth on the palm tree.
yes, yes.
Yeah, no, I've used that to help people understand. Like a good friend of mine, he got cancer. So again, put it in perspective as to what his cancer is in terms of the growth on the palm tree. I gave him the book, and I said, read this passage. It should help you understand what your cancer is. You know.
yeah, love Second Chance. I love that book.
Yeah.
Great book.
What do you love about it, Allan?
Oh, good question. Hard to say, except that I love the feel of it, and I love the stories, and I love the characters, and I love the hope. I love the hope in that book. The healing potential of what Sid discovered. So I think that's my favorite book. I enjoyed all his writings, but I think I love Second Chance the most. Like I love his old tapes the most. I mean, uh, Pallavi, is that how you pronounce your name, Pallavi?
Yeah. Yeah.
Pallavi, yeah, you were talking about that last time. I think about how the old tapes he made, the ones from the late '70s, and have the same feel to me that Second Chance does. And my God, I have to reflect a little bit on why that is. I know why. It's they they're more touching to me. We talked a little bit about that last time. Those his old tapes and Second Chance are very touching to me. They wake up something. They wake up something inside me. And
Your
anyway,
heart gets touched. Yeah.
heart is touched. Allan wakes up, and then Allan goes to sleep again. And there we go. Welcome to humanity.
Yeah, it
Right.
feels the same. Feels the same to me with the old talks. Like I love listening to them so much because they somehow really help me to just fall into this peace or quiet space. And I think I like the way he talks in there about. I think he uses a bit of different words than later. It talks a lot about God and Christ consciousness, and also like with I don't remember Second Chance so well. I read it, but I didn't read it recently. But what you said about the tree and inside and outside, it sounded like something he talks a lot about in these old tapes too, about the inside world, which is the real world, and that we have to see it's a spiritual world, and that the outside is just a reflection of that, or the illusion, basically. And there's something in there which really touches my heart too, and then yeah, touches like a deeper feeling.
Yeah. When I first read Second Chance back in 1985, you guys, it did not hit me at all. At all. I thought it was an interesting story, period. And then years later, I mean, we're talking, just recently in March, on the recommendation of Bill Pettit during his course. Um, it was, oh my gosh, incredibly powerful. Something I noticed that I found really interesting is how Sid takes the reader through just a peaceful, quiet state of mind, looking at the view in front, how beautiful it is. And then all of a sudden, Richard's back in his head thinking about the horrible things that happened to him back in New York. And then the next page or the next paragraph, we're back in this beautiful scene in nature. So to me, that describes, like, Sid is showing us what it's like to go in and out, in and out. We're in quiet peace. Our personal lives are not on our mind. And then we're back in the brain, ego, personal mind thinking. And so it showed me how flexible that is. That's so malleable to be able to go back and forth like that. Does that make sense to any of you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember George once said that everybody has this default state of mind, basically, that they feel more comfortable in, and that can be a depressed state of mind or a happy state of mind or whatever it is. But I feel that so strongly in myself. I can open up, I can close, and sometimes the closing feels more comfortable because it's that default state of mind, that the habitual way of using my personal thinking and my experience. It's irritating, but I think has some truth.
Well, what do you mean, Alan? Say some more if you can. Take a sip first and then tell us more. I didn't mean to
Well,
take your cup away from you.
um, yes, over the years I've become more bored with that default state of mind, more more unwilling to let it settle in for a long period of time, more able to step back from it when I'm there, so that I can say basically, well, okay, you can do this if you want to, but you don't have to, you know. So
By the
I don't.
default state, you mean the closed, when you get more closed and
Yeah,
withdrawn?
when you get depressed, anxious, upset, worried, um, frustrated, you know, whatever the negative feeling is, you know, when your mind is taking you to that place, because ironically it's more comfortable there. This understanding gives you the perspective to be able to step back and go, well, wait a minute, you know, come on, let's do something else.
Yeah, it feels more comfortable because it's what we're used to,
Yeah,
we're more
yeah,
accustomed to.
yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of something I'm experiencing with my physical stuff right now. Because I've been in experienced pain the last 6 years, and now I've been, of course, like learning a lot of new stuff about it, and I've also been getting better. But there's still like some general constant pain going on, and it goes up and down a lot. And I just see that my default state, in that sense, like my habitual state, has become over the last years to constantly monitor it, of course, because it feels
Mm.
doesn't feel safe. It feels shaky in the body and fragile. So I noticed that when I sometimes fall out of it, I get very irritated by that too. It's like when I move for a few minutes without checking in or without being scared, at some point my mind goes, oh, what's that? I forgot something, basically.
Mm.
And then I'm getting very kind of, sometimes I get very frustrated because I notice how much I'm still in this habitual thing. And but I like during the last days, I had 2 weeks of more pain, so that's why this coming up. And during the last days, I kind of realized that even getting a better understanding of this or letting go of this or whatever is just not in my hands. Like it's not something I can do with my mind or my willpower or
Mm.
whatever. It's just like you can only surrender to the process and to this understanding just happening and seeing new stuff.
Mm.
And like every time I come to
Mm.
this point that it's really not my job to do that, it feels so relieving. And I notice again and again that I'm not really suffering from the pain, I'm suffering from all my thoughts about it and beliefs about it. So it's very interesting to see, but it's quite a journey also. And sometimes it feels a bit sticky because of course I would like it to change the most, and I feel like I'm seeing all kinds of cool new things and all kinds of things are changing in my life, but the sticky issues that you want to be gone most.
Wow, that was so
That was
right
great.
on.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I
really.
really resonated with what you said, Pallavi. And you know, you used the word monitoring. Like we get into monitoring. Where's my head at? Or, is this okay? Or should I be doing something about this? And what you said about there is nothing to do. You gain an understanding by reading, listening to Sid, and then life takes over. Life happens, and you get um, gifted. I guess it's almost like these little gifts come around because you catch yourself in the act of monitoring what's going on in your head, or um, pressuring yourself with thinking, it should be different or better, or how come I'm not progressing faster, further, faster, all that stuff. And that is, you can't do anything about that. Even, the idea of letting it go, that's a doing,
Totally.
right? Like if I'm holding a rock and I have to let it go, I have to open my fingers to let it go. It's just understanding is boom, that's it. And your understanding is going to be foremost when it is, and it's going to be buried when it is. That's the way it looks to me. I don't know if that makes sense to the three of you, but
Yeah, no, totally. That's the thing. Like,
Mm.
you just can't do it, and you can't do understanding, and behavior changes on its own with new insight. But I can't take an insight and do something with it with my mind and try to progress further or something. And it's just like a constant back and forth for me during this year since learning about this, of realizing this and getting back in the habit of trying to do it all and trust on my intellectual thinking. But it's like it's also like really a beautiful journey. Like, I'm so happy about what I'm seeing. And like, I think what's getting a little bit easier is during these times of feeling low or being caught up, that a little part of me knows that it will pass, and that there's nothing really to find in there. Like, I loved what Ellen, I think, was saying, of getting bored with this habitual state. I sometimes feel like I'm getting bored with my habitual thinking. Like, it's just so repetitive. And so, like, the more you see there's no new solutions coming out there, it seems to get a bit easier to just not be so interested in it.
Pallavi, I'll just speak to that because I've seen that in myself over the years is that you notice, and that's all it really is needed is you notice you're not thinking straight and it will pass. And simply just having that thought triggers renewal. And again, it's not up to you necessarily, but it is because you have to. Well, there's a term I love when things happen on autopilot, our innate self comes forward and we step aside and let that innate capacity all in come forward and it lives us without us necessarily understanding exactly what's going on other than it generally like the only thing that is really associated with it is positive feelings like positive stuff it comes to you and takes care of you and it's just again this whole thing of intellectual thinking it you know you know there's been discussion around free will. Do we actually have free will?
Yeah.
And Sid illustrates that so perfectly. There's numerous examples of yes, we do have free will. And even just me thinking I'm not seeing straight and stepping out of the way without doing anything consciously other than that one thought is my free will in action. And that I don't have control of time because that's not in my hands really when you understand what time is. And to be able to accept that the reset will come. And then all of a sudden you go, oh, I'm feeling better. The reset happened. Allan, what you talked about that default state, it's kind of like what you allow yourself to settle in, either consciously or not. But as one elevates our appreciation and understanding of what life is the default state, if you want to call it, ascends. So that increasingly we're landing in a default state that is at a higher level of consciousness as opposed to a lower level of consciousness. And I mean, all the outward stuff that happens is an absolute direct relation to our conscious state. I mean, one of my favorite books is The Missing Link. I mean, it's got so many, one sentence. That's all it could be that you got to think about you know, for the rest of your day, just to say, what is this? And it's so easy to get distracted by your thinking and what you perceive to be real when in actuality is an illusion of it's just another expression of what is going on in a real sense. So I had the pleasure of actually helping Sid with his books like Second Chance and Quest of the Pearl, Missing Link. Like I was the designer, not publisher, but I was the designer in behind the books. And we were doing the Missing Link, and it went through some book reviewers, and one came, and there was the manuscript came back with a bunch of comments, and Rika and I are looking through the comments, and we're going, I don't know if that was what Sid really intended here, so we checked it out with Sid. And he said, well, this is what the one comment is. And you know what his answer was? You know, just do what you feel is best. Like, he was basically reflecting it back at us that just trust the innate source. It will be obvious as to and there's really no right and wrong, because right and wrong is determined by your conscious level and what you perceive. It's all about perception, what you perceive based on your conscious level. And that you could come into the same scenario and with two different conscious levels, look at both differently. So when you're depressed or when you're elevated state of mind, like one of the things I was looking at that was really cool is this is in feelings. So that's a really cool indicator. Because Sid talks about what feelings a lot, and this is the opening sentence to the chapter on feelings. And this is in the missing link. Our feelings are the barometers of our thoughts. So if you simply just acknowledge the feeling that you've got, regardless of thought, it's an indicator as to where you are. I mean, if we can get to that default state, which I would describe as autopilot, where we're experiencing life using the innate capacity of who we are. And like when you look at the yin and the yang and the black and white, like form and formless are the same, but they're also opposites. And this is where, Sid talked about the concept of duality, is that the physical world it's real, but it isn't. But I mean, you can touch it, you can bang it, you can hurt yourself by accidentally contacting it in a way that hurts you. But so it illustrates right away, like, the pain is real, but it isn't, because if you acknowledge what it is. So this is where physical wellness, again, is so tied to mental/spiritual wellness that miracles happen. Like in the early years with Sid, like cancer was disappearing. Poof, like that. Because the inner soul of the people that were learning from Sid, it elevated their conscious functioning so that the physical outcome was illnesses were disappearing. I mean, can you explain that? I can't, other than what I've just done. So, I mean, when you look at the capacity for the source of life to do whatever is necessary to whomever, because those are all details, but it all comes back to one thing. The inner self will never cause harm. It will only cure. And if you're struggling with things, it will bring a solution that will help you. And we don't necessarily know what that's going to be until we go through it. We've got all these great feelings. They're amazing barometers. Like you enter a situation where you feel like your physical safety is threatened. Well, that's a feeling. So that's causing your inner self to respond in a way that the ultimate action is to get yourself to safety. It may not be obvious, but it will be, when you truly understand what's going on. Like Sid, there's a story that he shares about a time that a group of them on Salt Spring were at a bonfire somewhere, and Chip and Jan, they're two very early students of Sid's that, again, everybody wakes up in their own term, their own time, and has their own defining moment, to borrow a catchphrase from George Pransky, defining moment. Sid had his amazing, profoundly deep defining moment that changed him forever and all these other people. But Sid followed Chip and Jan, unbeknownst to them, down the beach because they wanted to go and have their own quiet time. And so they hear a noise behind him, and Sid steps out of the forest and he says to Chip, "So you want to teach this, do you?" And Chip hadn't said anything. But Sid said there's no greater joy than tapping somebody on the shoulder and waking them up. Sid had this amazing ability to see people that were asleep and just tap on them. I was one. Um, the initial tap for me woke me up to the realization that I was searching, and I went, oh. And from that point forward, I stopped searching. But I didn't know I was searching at the time that I got the tap on the shoulder.
Wow. That was really
No,
something, Richard.
that tap happened the first time I met Sid in the Lanai room, I think, St. Mary's Resort. That was the tap you're talking about. So, um, yeah. Anyway, yeah, that was
You
that.
can't plan for it, can you, Alan?
I didn't plan for it. I was, I believed in just showing up. That was my philosophy of life. I had no idea, and like I've said before, is it's like a part of me opened up wider than it had ever opened before, and yeah, that was the tap.
Can you say more about that? What that initial
I don't know.
experience was for you?
I'm so I have such a hard time with using concepts to describe this, or metaphors, or um, it it um, it was the experience of looking at something or someone that you love deeply and opening up to that experience. It was yeah, that's probably the closest I can get to it. It was a deep love, not for Sid, but for what was happening there. You know, deep, deep love for just period, just love, love. You
And that happened for you, Alan, if I understood, if I heard right, that happened while you were at a Sid lecture listening to Sid, or?
Yeah, yeah. Roger Mills had invited us up, right, to hear Sid because they thought he might have something of value for all us human relations trainers. So there were about 13 of us or so that went up, except except for one guy. And I've always felt sorry for this guy because when we came back, we'd given up all our techniques and training. And this guy was left with a group of people that he'd worked with for years that all of a sudden didn't want to do what we'd done before. But yeah, so, and some of us heard, some of us didn't. We all heard at different levels that it meant something different to each of us. And
So
yeah,
were you
anyway,
all the characters in um, The Enlightened Gardener?
no, I don't think so.
I was
Rich,
thinking maybe, Kim Kadu and, the psychologists at the Advanced Human Studies, maybe they're the ones who were the characters, but
maybe,
I guess it could have been your Oregon group also. Yeah,
yeah,
or any group for that matter. There will be some, people who are resistant. I was resistant in the beginning, and I'll tell you, you mentioned Roger Mills, bless his heart, because I was thinking these people are crazy. They're all on drugs. There's really, and then I find out, well, wait a minute. Roger Mills has a PhD from, Princeton, I think, right? I mean, some Ivy League school. He's brilliant. And what are all these doctors? And, Rick Suarez's brother is a surgeon. And, why are these people seeing something that I'm not? And I know it's not because they have this Ivy, covered academia behind them. I knew it didn't have to do with academics, but it was because of people like Roger Mills, Bill Pettit, that I realized, I want to listen more because there is something here. It sounds a little woo woo. It sounds kind of, because you can't conceptualize what it is that Sid was pointing to. So it's not about an intellectual process, which I think a lot of people try to understand through the intellect, and then they miss it.
I really appreciate hearing your stories about what happened for you there. It's so nice to listen and to hear about Sid from firsthand. Like, unfortunately, I never met him. But I guess for me, the first moment I felt that I somehow saw something or fell out of this normal life thing, illusion, was in some spiritual group when I was pretty young, when I was 19. And I just had this experience of this okayness, of all the problems falling away, where you just see for a moment that it's all perfectly okay as it is. And for me, like, a lot of searching followed. I was with spiritual master. I was for a few years with Osho, and like did several things on in spiritual directions. But for me, what was interesting when I learned about Sid from Hannah in the beginning of the year, that I think it was after the second session with her, we talked about something, but it was New Year's Eve or the first day of the year, something like that. It was very sweet. And I noticed that after the session with her, I was just really blank, and somehow I realized that the searching is over, like the searching on the outside is over. And it's like I finally understood what other teachers have been telling me for years. So look within, and you all got it inside, but I never really got what it means. And I feel like in that moment I really had an experience of what it means. And of course I forget and I go out there again and blah blah, but I still have this experience and I know where to look, actually. So I was very grateful for that. It's like with Sid's teaching, I feel like I suddenly understand all kinds of stuff I heard before, but I couldn't really feel or experience. And now it makes so much sense, like I can hear it better or something.
And I love how, you were saying, Richard, that the feeling is such like having an inner compass. We can rely on our feelings letting us know if we're in a good direction or not. And every human, there are no exceptions, has that inner compass. All they have to do is realize that they have that inside of them and that they can rely upon it. It's so reliable. It'll always let you know when you're heading for, a bad place. Not just, if you're at a party, if you're a youngster at a party and somebody offers you a drug. Not just that. I mean, that's the obvious. I mean, the stuff that's not so obvious, like when I start ruminating about something that is completely non-productive to be thinking about. There is, why am I bothering with this? And we get the feeling that lets us know you don't have to. You have free will. You don't have to bother yourself with this. There's no point to it.
It's wonderful that you just simply the simple acknowledgement of where are your feelings at will serve to, like, if you need to flip 180, you'll flip 180, and it's always 180 in the positive direction. It's never in the opposite direction, because it might be that you can't see where you're at in that moment, but it's only because you're momentarily have misplaced what the compass is telling you. I mean, it's just like I said, I didn't even know I was searching, and bingo, I realized that and I stopped. And when will an insight happen? If you figure that one out, let me know. Because again, it's you'll get something that will just come along that is so right. And just that's one of the things I love about essence, and just deep, deep, deep existence, is that it will always be right. There is never any negative, ill intentions of that knowledge, that experience. And I mean, human beings, I mean, man, we're complicated, but we're also incredibly simple if we would just allow the simplicity to come through. And I mean, that's again, going back to Sid, he said, that, the secret is in simplicity, because it's only through simplicity that all manner of complexity is resolved. And trying to think your way out of the box, just live out of the box, yes. And all manner of knowledge, like what you need to know, when you need to know. It's just like Michael Jordan, the basketball player, like when he was asked about being in the flow. He was just a player that just excelled because he allowed himself to be in the flow, and it would cause this genius level play to happen. Wayne Gretzky's, and these are sports guys, but when you look at good writers, the same principle applies. Is you just need to allow the flow. And what is flow? Connecting to your inner self. I had a friend of mine that we were working together wee hours of the morning getting something done. He's sitting behind me watching what I'm doing, and he's shaking his head and going, "How do you know how to do all this stuff?" And I said, "Well, I'm intuitive." And he said, "Well, what does that mean?" So we looked it up on the spot because I couldn't give him a definition. And this is a discovery that I just love, because it allows us to understand who we are innately. So one of the definitions was no prior knowledge. So intuition, intuition is that state of mind that allows us to do something, speak about something, etc., 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 with no prior knowledge or no prior experience. Again, they're just words. The key one here is prior, no prior. So we can go into a situation, and just because of the intuitive sense of human beings, that's one of the innate skills we have, if we allow it. Again, if we're unaware of it, then we're asleep. That's simple. And so, depending on the degree of awakeness, allows that innate intuition to just move. And so that's the only thing I can explain when you come into a situation like even these talks, to be able to share what you know and literally just share from your soul. Like, it may not have been a prior experience that you've had, but there's just something that resonates that causes this thought that causes you, um, Sid writes about it, cause and effect, positive thought, positive feelings. Some simplicity like that. Like, so when you've got a situation like this where somebody's sharing an experience and it resonates, cause and effect.
Yeah, it's wild how that works. The human system
Yeah.
behind it all.
I love the fact that the innate qualities of existence are positive.
Mm-hmm.
If we understand that, our life changes.
Mm-hmm.
If we allow it to happen, our life changes. First, we have to be aware. So conscious state is, we have to be aware of what we're doing. And conscious, like Sid used, again, I love metaphors, and I'm working on a book, and Lori's going to be one of the collaborators on a book I'm writing called ESSA, Metaphors for Life, because Sid would often say, don't listen to my words. If you hear a word that says it for you, use that word. So this is, again, your inner self resonating with whatever, whomever is saying, but it causes a resonance inside you that just allows you to vibrate, to exist and if it's a higher frequency of resonance, go there. Um, we don't know what the upper end is until we experience it. And if we know there's no upper end, it's just infinite, then we're good for life. From a point of view of what we're able to experience in this finite experience called life in the form. Because I can't speak to it directly about my experiences prior to coming into form and what it's going to be like after I leave form, but just the pure fact that there's a continuum there, that's what it is. You don't know until you get there.
Yeah, I mean, just that one sentence that you said about our default setting being peace of mind. Think about that. I mean, that is just so powerful. If people just knew that,
Yeah,
that that's what they're looking for,
yeah.
that it's always there. It's always, looking
Always
for us,
was there.
always within us, minus all the noise on top of, the noise just covers up that peaceful state of mind.
There was one sentence in The Enlightened Gardener Revisited, I think, that for me one summer, because I was, going through some struggling in my mind more than anywhere else, one sentence: contentment will bring peace of mind and happiness. You could transpose those words, so contentment brings peace of mind and happiness. But you could transpose any of those three words, so peace of mind brings contentment and happiness. Happiness brings peace of mind and contentment. So they're just words trying to describe exactly the same thing. They all come back to that one definition, if you want to call it. Again, definition is just a word
Pointing to something.
pointing to something.
It's so interesting that you said you could transpose the words. I just discovered that recently. When I'm reading a paragraph from Second Chance or In Search of the Pearl, and then I write about it in the comments, I noticed that I was, how am I going to make this a quote? Because I'm leaving some words out and putting other words in. And I realized that that is perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine. It's still Sid's quote. Just, a few words were turned around because, it'll be boring if it's redundant to what's on the video. And I just got a kick out of that because it kind of deepened. It felt like my own understanding of that paragraph had deepened as a result of my fingers just transposing a word here and there, because I was looking at it on the book and I thought, well, the next sentence, I want to combine the two sentences in one. And it was so, it just said it differently, but it said the same thing. It's fascinating how that is, how there's this knowing, this undercurrent of knowing that everybody has, every single soul on earth. I mean, that just really blows me away. And when people discover that, I don't know if Richard or Alan, were you at this conference? This was one of the most mind-blowing conferences. I think, pretty sure it was in San Jose, and I don't remember the year. It must have been in the late 80s, early 90s, when Barbara Wilson, well, Roger was still alive, and he brought the women from the Modelo Housing Project. Barbara Wilson, is that her name? It's been so many
Yeah,
years.
Beverly Wilson, I think.
Beverly, I knew it didn't sound right. Beverly Wilson and a few others. And they were talking about how they always thought that they were third generation welfare recipients. That was who they were, that was their lot in life, and that was all they could hope for. And in comes Roger Mills sharing what he could about parenting to help these single moms parent better. And one of them realized, wait a minute, Roger never said this. One realized that they lived so close to, I think it was Miami-Dade Community College, where they could get a GED. Now, when they had the mindset of, that's not for us, that's for those people, not us. They never even thought to go, like all of them wound up getting GEDs. They went on, some are still in the field working as social workers or, you know, trainings. Uh, you know, I mean, wow, we are not who we think we are. We are so much more. And who we think we are just blocks us from seeing deeper. Yeah, I love that. I mean, all these years, and that one really stuck with me.
Well, the cool thing is that what sticks with you also evolves. I mean,
How do you
Sid
mean?
asked me a question in the late 70s when we were living on Salt Spring and I was driving him somewhere and he says, "What do you want to do?" Well, it evolved over 30 years as to what my understanding of the question was. And I mean, that's true for us all the way through because as our consciousness deepens and as our understanding, awareness, understanding, those were metaphors for consciousness. So as our understanding evolves, deepens, broadens, uh, you know, we get a different take on what a word might mean or our experience or whatever. It took 30 years and it still is evolving. Because like until I get to that point where, I, you know, would just transcend physical life, it'll evolve again in such a way that I have no comprehension of what that will be or when it will be. Thank God, I enjoy my life, but just like, appreciate who we are now. And just that simple act transforms you.
I'm curious, and maybe Richard too, but I know Alan for sure. You were in, I don't know if you called them study groups or they were groups after listening to a Sid lecture where you would get together. This was before computers, before we were able to get together from across the pond, even, from we're all from such different places in the world, the four of us. So, what was that like? Could you share what that was like? Because I feel like this is a way of recreating some of that.
We used to talk after listening to Sid's tapes. That's the way we did it in Eugene, and mostly there were very few words. We'd listen to an old Sid tape with the idea that we're going to talk about it afterwards, and nobody would say anything. And after after a certain length of time, people would say, well, you know, that's what this is about. So then we'd leave. So they were, I mean, they were wonderful, wonderful sessions. And I think one of the reasons they were wonderful was because there were, 5 or 8 people maybe in a room, and they were all having some version of the same soul connecting experience. So, so when you looked around the room, you could see it. You could see it in people's eyes, and that was very peaceful, joyful, uh, affirming. It was very affirming. So anyway, that's how it went in Eugene. I don't know. I don't know about other places, Richard. Do you?
Similar in the Nanaimo, Helen.
The Nanaimo.
That's where I came from originally when we touched base with Sid. And no, like those quiet moments where you would just, a tape would have played, or you read it, because Sid was starting to write, but he would share a tape personally for somebody that, like Elsie, for example, that the outcome of her hearing something off that would just initiate her sharing. And but like you say, I mean, you could listen to a tape and nothing would be said for 5 minutes, and this amazing quiet, calm state was just present in the room. And, you know, it takes something to learn to allow that state to be. Like, I always was intrigued by conferences where Sid would talk, is that in order to honor the level, it almost seemed necessary when Sid would sit down, is that this just state of calm would permeate through the audience. That there was a sort of a process of preparedness that was going to allow the conscious level that Sid was going to share from to come to the forefront. And, and it depended sometimes on what was going on, because when we were down at Seabeck, this is hilarious. We were somewhat near the kitchen, and somebody in the kitchen was doing dishes, and Sid was waiting for this calm moment to just settle in and whatnot. And then something in the kitchen, you'd hear dishes rattling and he'd just about go ready to talk because the calm was there. And then all of a sudden the dishes would start up again. It just like uproarious laughter. Like when, and this was actually on tape, I think, but it was probably cut out in the final version. But it was just this example, classic example of life. And despite everybody in the room kind of preparing themselves and Sid, preparing for his sharing to begin, the dishes kept getting in the way. I'd love to hear more about your early connection, because I know, like when we met George and Roger at Shawnigan Lake, we had a weekend away from Salt Spring, and that's when the first psychologist showed up, and people like yourselves that were there to learn about Sid in terms of who he was, what he was sharing, what miracles were going on, like what was causing this. And one of the things I remember that Roger took home at one point, and I don't know whether this was before your time or same time. This is what I heard back from that Roger went to his boss and said, "We can't do what we're doing anymore. We're damaging people more than we're helping them."
Yeah.
But, so to hear that, um, to get that sense of understanding that what they were doing was not healing people, and it was because of technique and learned knowledge and stuff like that, as opposed to just tapping into the innate knowledge, the innate abilities, the means to recognize a human soul that's hurting, that needs guidance to bring that soul back to their true nature.
Yeah, that was when I was there, was when that was happening. And I spent a summer on St. Mary's Lake in a cabin, and I never saw Sid that whole summer, but I used to go sit in Vesuvius Bay and watch the sunsets. Every night I did that.
Yeah.
And Salt Spring Island holds a huge place in my heart as something extremely special. So I mean, just hearing the word Nanaimo, it fills me with positive feelings.
Well, you must have come
So
up
thank you.
to visit Nanaimo and the group that was there, and because it was beautiful at the time. This was a way of physically getting around and sharing what we knew. And I was one of, if you want to call it, in the back, you know, Salt Spring when we had the Cedar Beach gatherings, and they were weekly, and Sid would share, and then there would be just time to come together. But he would always say, share what you know. And if he saw anybody like me that was sort of hanging on the periphery, not sharing, there were times he'd come up to me and just sort of give me a nudge and say, why don't you go talk to that person over there? It was just him seeing what I was doing and giving me a nudge because he knew what the nudge was capable of producing for me, like just coming out of my shell, if you want to call it, of insecurity and just engaging with another human soul because he knew the outcome of what that sharing could produce. Cool. And like
Very cool.
I enjoy Salt Spring. Like we've been going, and we bought a place there in 2004, and then there's a couple of places that I really love to watch sunsets. And Vesuvius Beach is right up there, but I don't have to go anywhere because I can watch the sunset off my front deck.
Yeah.
We have this really quaint 300 square foot, fully furnished space that my wife and I have for July and August. And if the universe aligns, is what I describe as sunset. If it aligns in a way that just opens your heart up when you watch it, that's an amazing sunset. And there's another place down on Booth Canal that's like that too. And if you can just relax into that space that is unfolding literally before your eyes and just grow with it and flow with it and no expectations of, gee, I wish it would be this or that, and just simply appreciate what is unfolding, the sheer beauty of it, and the fact that we live in this amazing physical reality called nature. So that would give you a sense, Laurie, as to why I picked that Booth Canal sunset for Space Time Matter article. It spoke to when the form comes into alignment, and because it's space, it's the physical space. Time, it's a passage of time, and matter, it's there's all these formed elements in front of us, but it's completely beyond what you think it is. But when you connect, Alan, like you were saying, like just going down to Vesuvius and enjoying a sunset, you're just allowing yourself to align with the universe in those moments. I love that. I'm grateful that you're back in my life again, that we're coming, it's interesting how life does this. There's states of convergence and divergence and things like that where it's like the pulse of life allows you to be in each other's presence and to be apart from one another. There's this convergence and divergence that's, we don't know what the story is or the reason is behind it, other than, in this case, two like souls coming together. I love that. I don't know you that well, but I know you really well.
Yeah, likewise.
Two old white men?
Oh no! I I apologize. I apologize.
No, I said that. You didn't say the
No,
old part.
I
I added
apologize.
the old. See how we piggyback off each other? Oh, that's so funny. I couldn't resist. I just
That
couldn't.
is funny. Thank you. Thank you.
You know, there's something wonderful about getting older. Unbelievably wonderful. You know, I'd rather keep going. Um, but the stories, right? And the history of anybody's life is remarkable.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for doing this, Lori.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I have mine to thank because believe me, I didn't do it. I did not do it. It really was like, okay, this is the next thing I'm doing. I had no idea what I was doing either. The way it started, I got a notebook. It's not here, it's in the other room that says, um, you can do this. It's got this modern thing. I knew I wanted to do something online to bring people together and reading and listening to Sid again, and for people doing it for the first time, you know, as an introduction.
I wanted to ask you something, or maybe share. I'm in a WhatsApp group from people who did the program with Hannah, and we just started to do something where we decide on a old talk from Sid and then listen to it, like everyone on their own. But then we share about it in the WhatsApp group, and we did this over the weekend. It's a very old talk. I think it's called Bellevue. It's from 1977 or something like that, and it was just lovely because I felt very connected with the people in the group because we were all listening to the same thing and then sharing a bit about what we've heard. And I just wanted to ask if maybe we could think about this too for this group, that maybe sometimes we pick something that we all listen to. So
I love that idea.
Yeah.
We did that in Peru with a group. Jack and Nicole Beasley put together. There were probably, I think, 19 of us, and we sat in a circle, and that's how it all began. Where the the recorder was in the middle of the circle, and we listened to an old talk of Sid's. Great way to start off. Yeah. Yeah. So if any of you have one talk in particular you'd like to do that with, I'll advertise it. And we could do that for our next webinar, right? Because this is already number 4. This is the 4th one. So it's 5 and 6. And then we'll have a break for over Christmas. And then hopefully a new group will come in. But that's the beauty, like, you know, everybody just sticks around as long as you want to. Right? I mean, there are 3 principals groups with 8,000 people, 8,000 members. So there's no end to how much we can grow.
Wow.
Yeah, I love that idea, Pallavi. I love that idea.
Oh, Pallavi, could you suggest something?
my
Not
favorite
meaning to
one
put you on the spot, but
my favorite one right now, I think it's just called Sid 1970 something. I don't know, but I could just post it in the group. I don't know if that's the real
Good.
name or whatever.
Good.
I got
Good.
it from somebody. I think it's a very early one too.
like you say, the
Yeah.
early tapes, he used different words, and again, like he
Yeah.
Yeah.
used the word soul a lot.
Yeah.
Um, as like the 3 principles were an evolution of Sid's understanding of from that one experience he had, and it was constant, but it was completely dynamic all the time. But it was because it continued to deepen for him in terms of his appreciation of what happened to him. Like the fact that an ordinary man had this experience and wasn't asking for it, pop, but he was awake enough to look at it and go, my, I understand what life is, without being egotistical or arrogant or anything like that. He just was appreciative of the fact that this experience happened to him, and everything that is, he's a pebble that was dropped into the pool of life that has a ripple effect that has touched all manner of other beings out there. And some people like Elsie and Chip and like everybody here, even, we reflect the ripple based on our conscious level. And so that would be a great idea, Pallavi, is to listen to that tape. One of my favorite ones that I listen to when I feel like I need a boost or just simply just need to reset is the recordings in California, Long Beach.
Mm.
He talks about going home. What does going home mean? Because everybody would perceive the same thing differently depending on their conscious level of what home is.
Yeah, it also feels like every time you listen to them, you hear something new, right? And I like sometimes I listen on and on to the same talk. And there's one way he talks about, when you just said he talks about soul in the old ones. There's one where he actually takes the thing from Christianity, from the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and puts it in mind, thought, and consciousness. And
The
there's
Trinity.
a lot of interesting stuff in there. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, the parallels are amazing because they're just words. But again, he said every religion's got it. It's just words. You just have to be cognizant of the fact that don't get caught up in the dogma, the words, all that stuff, because deep, deep down, it's from the same place.
It's like
And
sorry.
no, you
No, it's
go.
just like I also feel like I at sometimes I have moments where I can appreciate religion more, because for me, like, I got out of the church and everything because everything that's been going on. But like now sometimes I feel like I'm back to the simplicity of just resting in this faith in life or in God and in this feeling. And so interesting as if I had to take this whole complicated journey of figuring everything out and trying all the different techniques and strategies and like approaches, and then you come back to something that basically my grandma told me in a way, like not necessarily conscious of it, but like it's a very simple thing of surrendering to this bigger thing. And I don't know, it's just amazing.
Surrendering. I love that word. Really surrendering to what is, to the beauty of what is. Yeah, I love that. That's a wonderful idea. I'm not sure how I would do it. I mean, I guess I could play the the I guess for anybody who came on, if I had the recording, like I could get the recording of home, because that's really easy to get online, but I don't know of any of the earlier tapes that are online that we could pull in. So if
I
any
can
of you know,
Yeah, I
Well, I
mean, I
have.
got them from a Dropbox, but I think it's not clear if you can use them in a group or because on the rights on the talk. So I'm not sure how, like, I don't know.
yeah,
I,
like
I
if you
re-
were playing it at your place, how would it come across? But if I played it on my laptop, it would come across to everybody.
can you play a Google Drive file on this laptop? Because I have lots of Sid's older tapes on that I recorded. They're on Google Drive. So if we can, I don't know about that particular tape you're talking about, Pallavi, but I have wisdom and a spiritual reality and Shawnigan and some very.
Sean again is very cool. Like, I don't remember what's in there, but I remember that I liked it a lot.
Yes, me too. One of my favorite tapes. I have no idea what was in there. So yeah,
Allan,
so
to I think speak to your question about Google Drive. I use Google Photos, and like it's a channel that they offer the means to share things privately. So quite likely you could, if you're in Google Drive, you can share that recording and you send it out to whomever by email, so anybody that has the link can listen to it. It's the same thing with like Google Photos. If I send the link to one person or 50 people, the people that have the link can see it, even though it's a private album. That's another question too. Is like I'm positive in Sid's mind that if there was a way that his works could be unencumbered by copyright and all this sort of stuff, because his sole purpose in life was to alleviate the suffering of humanity. And if it gets encumbered in humanity through copyright and all that sort of stuff, well, it's actually not achieving Sid's dream.
Mm-hmm.
Simply just to, one soul. That's often what he talks about, is just if he can help alleviate the suffering for one soul, he knows his work has not been in vain. So
Yeah.
humanity sometimes gets in the way.
Yeah.
Unintentional.
Yeah, that issue I know has come up in the past, and I've been a part of that. Making sure that no money exchanges hands, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Being respectful, Allan, is good because
yes,
you're honoring Sid as a result.
absolutely, absolutely.
So I think we have a mechanism, Lori, is that whomever can share the link if that's a possibility, because I know it's possible with Google. So
Okay. And then I would.
I can try it with this one to put it on Google Drive, or I can send it to one of you guys when you know how to do this, because I only know to do it how to do it on Dropbox. On Dropbox you can do this too, like put it in there and send the link to everybody. But I don't use Google Drive myself, so.
it's a sheep in another sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
It's all same deep down.
Yeah.
Like it's digital. It's there. It's out there virtually. They may have slightly different ways of accessing it, but the ultimate thing is they are actually all the same. So
they would love to have you join them, Pallavi. Google Drive would love to have you sign up.
I think I'm already on Google Drive.
Yeah, I think I might be on
there. Yeah.
I might be actually on there too, because I think I was translating Hannah's book during this year, and I think she shared it with me on Google, but I just didn't put anything up there myself.
Well, we can, IM each other and decide how to do this, and I'll advertise it for next week. I think that's a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that idea. So what last things should we say? We're past the hour, of course. It's hard to stick to an hour, even with just 4 of us, right? How long are how long would that would only be, because they're abbreviated, right? They're only, if I recall, half an hour, the old tapes?
I think this
20
one is
minutes?
about 25, but do we want to listen on the call or like before the call?
Probably before the call would be ideal, right? That would be ideal. So I'm not sure how I would get it to people.
well, I think if you you probably have. Is the group private on Facebook, Lori, or not?
Private, yeah.
Okay, well, if it's private, you could share it to the group.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and then that way, again, I'm not sure exactly how the e-notice will work, because again, you hear people complaining about Facebook's algorithm and all that sort of stuff. Well, that's illusion, really. I mean, like, it depends on how many friends you have, as how deeply it's buried in the feed and whatnot. So I think if you include like a cover note that's short, that's to the point, that this session coming up is, we're going to listen to a tape prior to, here's the link for it. And I would suggest that in terms of listening is do it, an hour before the session. Just
If
give it
people
time.
can.
Well, yeah,
That
well,
would be
again,
ideal. I would
yeah,
make that suggestion.
yeah,
Right.
because that way it's fresh in your mind, but not too fresh, and you're giving them, say, an hour to let the inner self ruminate on it, and because sometimes you need that. Like George talked about the back burner. Like all human beings have this innate back burner that, depending on our capacity, which is totally dependent on our conscious level, like just to simply put it into the back burner and let it simmer for a bit, and then pop, is kind of when insights start happening, and oh, I heard something, and sometimes you don't know what you've heard until you open your mouth.
Yeah, I love that idea. So Pallavi could just probably share it right on the
Yeah, yeah.
Facebook group, and I will write the description
Cool.
with all those suggestions. Wonderful. Yeah. Four heads are better than one, that's for sure. I like this. All right. Well, have a wonderful rest of your day. It's already
Yeah.
late for Pallavi, earlier for Richard and Allan. Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting rolling.
Yeah.
What's that?
We're getting rolling. I just at the Mystery School on Facebook. It's a private group, 25 members. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's the perfect venue. Like if people are paying attention, Lori, they'll get their feed.
Wonderful. All right.
Thank you for the
Thank
lesson.
you. Thank
See you
you.
next week. See you next Tuesday.
Thank
Bye,
you all.
everybody.
Everybody.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
time.
Thanks so much. This was so great. I loved it. We went deep.